This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Kids, little kids, they grow up believing that they can be a hero if they drive a sword into the heart of anything different. And I'm the monster, it's Nimona, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. We are talking about Nimona this week, the Netflix original, although it had a pretty precarious path to get to that release, which we talked about in the prequel episode if you want to learn more about that. And I wanted to mention this here as well, in case you don't listen to the prequel episodes, because I know our main episodes are more popular. That makes sense. They're where most of the content is. But on our most recent prequel episode, we had some incredible listener submitted information from Miko over on Goodreads, one of our fans, who did some data analysis that we shared the link to that on social media and in the notes and stuff for the most recent prequel episode. But in that, we discussed this information. Basically, he did some data analysis, data collection to compare like the ratings on Goodreads to the movie ratings, and then could juxtapose that with our whether or not we choose the book or the movie, and all kinds of different things, and also culminated with the now I don't know if infamous is the right word, but the Steve variable. The Steve, they've got to come up with a term for the...
I've been calling it the official Steve count.
Yes, the Steve count, the Steve index, what have you, of how many Steves or Stevens work on a film. Does that relate to the quality of the film? As it turns out, I won't spoil it, but there is a relation of how many Steves work on the film, and Miko was able to get that information by basically scraping IMDb's cast and crew list, and then comparing that to IMDb ratings and other things, and it's all beautifully mapped out in scatter plots on that on the website that we shared on the last prequel episode. If you have not listened to that and checked that information out, it's a lot of fun, and I wanted to thank Miko again for that. So go listen to that prequel and check that information out. But now we're going to get in to our discussion of Nimona and start with a little summary if you have not read or watched Nimona in Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
This is the film synopsis plot summary for Nimona as sourced from Wikipedia. The citizens of a medieval futuristic kingdom are protected by the Institute of Elite Knights, established by the legendary heroine Glorith, who vanquished a great black monster and enclosed the kingdom with a high wall 1,000 years ago. Ballister Boldheart is the first commoner to become a knight, as Queen Valerin is trying to change tradition so that anyone can become a hero. During the ceremony, a laser is shot from Ballister's sword, killing Valerin. Ballister's boyfriend and fellow knight, Ambrosius Goldenloin, becomes distraught and disarms Ballister, dismembering Ballister's right arm in the process. Ballister then becomes a fugitive. As Ballister crafts a prosthetic replacement arm, he is visited by Nimona, a teenage outcast who has faced persecution for her shape-shifting abilities. Seeing a villainous spirit in Ballister as he is facing similar treatment for his commoner origin and the murder of the queen, Nimona declares herself to be his sidekick. To clear Ballister's name, the duo kidnaps Diego, the squire who gave Ballister the sword. Diego gives them video evidence of the director of the Institute swapping out Ballister's sword, revealing her to be the murderer. The duo confronts Ambrosius and the director with the evidence, but the director manipulates her knights into destroying it. Later, Ambrosius confronts the director. She admits that she framed Ballister and murdered Valerin, as she objected to Valerin revising tradition by allowing commoners to become knights, fearing that doing so would lead to the kingdom's downfall. However, Ballister reveals that he had recorded the director's confession, and Ambrosius turns out to be a disguised Nimona. When celebrating this in the hideout, Ballister posts it online, leading to public outcry. The director discovers that Nimona is the great black monster defeated by Glorith on an ancient scroll. She then uses this information to convince the kingdom's citizens that Ballister used Nimona's powers to fake her confession. The real Ambrosius meets with Ballister and reveals Nimona's past, insisting that Nimona deliberately deceived Ballister. Shocked by the revelation, Ballister argues with Nimona and questions their friendship. Feeling betrayed, Nimona flees into the woods. There, Nimona reminisces about her past 1,000 years ago. She wandered the world and transformed into animals to try and fit in with the wildlife, but none of the creatures she encountered accepted her. After encountering Glorith, who was a child at the time, Nimona transformed into a human. Glorith and Nimona became friends, and Glorith was accepting of Nimona's powers. However, the other citizens of Glorith's village, including her parents, believed Nimona was a monster after discovering her abilities. The villagers attacked Nimona with torches, which accidentally set the village on fire. A confused Glorith became hostile towards Nimona. With Ballister's abandonment and Glorith's betrayal echoing in her head, a distraught Nimona transforms into the Great Black Monster after entering the city and decides to kill herself by impaling herself on the sword of Glorith's statue. However, before she can do so, Ballister stops her and apologizes. Nimona changes back to human form and embraces Ballister. The kingdom's citizens see this and are moved by it, but the director, unmoved, orders a laser cannon to be fired from the wall to kill Nimona. Ambrosius protests, knowing that firing a laser into the city would kill thousands. The director, however, turns on them using the same laser she used to kill the queen and prepares to fire the cannon herself. To save the kingdom, Nimona assumes a giant red phoenix-like form and flies into the cannon, resulting in her apparent death as well as the death of the director. The resulting explosion destroys part of the wall, revealing a beautiful mountainous valley beyond. Sometime later, the kingdom undergoes several changes. The breach in the wall has become a passageway through which citizens travel freely. Nimona and Ballister are honored as heroes, and Ballister's relationship with Ambrosius has been restored. At the end of the film, Ballister visits his old hideout that he and Nimona shared. He hears Nimona's voice and joyfully realizes that she has survived. The end. Whew, that was longer than I thought it was. All right, that's what happened in Nimona if you had not watched it. I have quite a few questions. Let's get into them. And was that in the book?
Gaston, may I have my book, please?
How can you read this? There's no pictures.
Well, some people use their imagination.
So, as I stated in the summary, we are introduced to Ballister pretty early, who is a young, when we see him, I guess in like video.
Yeah, we see like a video of him as a kid.
Yeah.
But he's an adult.
Yeah, he's an adult now, but he has been trained to become a knight and become the first commoner who's a knight, because before that, I guess it was some sort of, royalty system, or, like lord, you had to have
nobility.
A lordship or nobility or whatever. But he's a commoner who's going to become a knight. And then we also find out during this introduction to his character that not only is he the first commoner set to become a knight, that he's dating Ambrosius, who is like the archetypal knight. He is a descendant of Glorith, and thus has like the most glorious bloodline encounter to Ballister. Anyways, I wanted to know if that background of Ballister becoming a knight, but he's a commoner, and this being like a new thing, and then him dating Ambrosius, the descendant of Glorith, if that all comes from the book. Because it is peak YA. It is peak young adult literature, let me tell you.
All right, so got a couple questions here.
Yes.
First off, there's nothing in the book about Ballister being the first commoner to become a knight. I did like this change, though. I thought it felt in line with the themes, and it also felt like a good kind of modern, quote-unquote, addition to the story.
Yeah. I mean, you say that the story's only...
Yeah, the not graphic
old.
novel is only, almost 10 years old, but I felt like kind of in line with issues that we face today, I guess.
Yeah, well, and it also, I mean, it's definitely in line with stuff that was popular maybe when this movie was being written and made, where, because that was like the big thing that people were like arguing. And one of the things I liked about The Last Jedi, I'm a Last Jedi defender, but one of the things in that was that, hey, find out, spoilers for Last Jedi, I guess, and then not spoilers because they undid it. Spoilers, Rey is like not anybody. She's not like, she doesn't have
don't have to be a special Skywalker bloodline.
Yes, you don't have to come from one of like three families, or really just one family with ancient, incredible bloodline in order to be a hero in this universe. You can just be a normal person. And this is like in line with that
Yes.
idea.
Yeah. So moving on with the rest of your questions, Ambrosius is not a descendant of Glorith either, but I also thought that that was in line with the themes and worked well. And in fact, in the book, it's also revealed that both Ballister and Ambrosius grew up together in like an orphanage, I think. There's a little like, it's not part of the main storyline, but there are a couple like bonus comics at the back that it said ran as Christmas specials when this was originally being published online.
Yeah.
And one of them was like the two of them like growing up in what appeared to be an orphanage
Okay.
when they were kids. So it's almost kind of like the opposite
Right,
for
yeah.
him.
Yes. Which I think works. Just adding that dynamic of since we are making them like a relationship, and then you're adding the storyline of the commoner making, since they're in a relationship, adding even more kind of tension there by having him be from this, glorious royal bloodline or whatever, and noble bloodline, whereas Ballister is just a
guy,
just a dude.
But Ballister and Ambrosius do have a romantic history, although the movie is actually more upfront about it. The graphic novel uses a lot of subtext in regard to their relationship, and part of that is because there's actually like not a time jump, but the events of the novel take place like much farther removed than the inciting incident that causes Ballister to no longer be a knight.
Oh, so like that makes sense.
So they have like a history.
Right. Because that's honestly what I was expecting once the inciting incident that I'll ask about here just momentarily happens. I was actually expecting a bit of a time jump when it doesn't seem like they're really, maybe a couple of weeks or something, but like at most like weeks or days.
Yeah.
But I would have thought maybe, it's a year later, it's 2 years
Yeah,
later
I thought there was going to be a time jump as well, just having read the graphic novel, and I was a little surprised when there wasn't. But overall, I also thought that the movie being like more upfront with their relationship was also a positive change. And I agree with you, it is peak YA.
Yes.
Never forget that this started as a Tumblr blog.
Yeah. So we get to the actual knighting ceremony where Ballister is going to become a knight. He gets up on stage, and Queen Valorin does the thing where she knights him, and then as she hands back his sword, the sword like opens up and it shoots a laser out of the bottom of it and murders the queen. And then everybody assumes that Ballister was somehow responsible for this. And after the first laser fires, Ambrosius, who is standing right there, goes to like knock the sword out of his hand and ends up cutting Ballister's arm off.
Yeah.
Again, it seems kind of unintentional, like in the movie at least it's portrayed like his goal wasn't to cut his arm off. He was like swinging his sword to like knock the sword away, and it just caught his arm kind of. It's kind of how it feels in the movie. And I wanted to know if that is our big inciting incident that will kick everything off. And I wanted to know if that came from the book.
So Ballister's sword murdering the queen is not from the book. That is not the inciting incident. In the book, Ballister's backstory is that he and Ambrosius were competing against each other in a joust. And the winner of this joust was going to be like the Institute's champion and be like the head of the knight police force, basically. Okay. And so they're jousting, and then Ballister wins, and Ambrosius' lance explodes, kind of similar to how the sword does, and it takes off Ballister's arm. And Ambrosius insists that this was an accident, but Ballister thinks that he did it on purpose. So then, because Ballister has been damaged, quote unquote, the institution casts him aside and he can't be a knight anymore, which is what kicks off his path to villainy. And as I said, all of this takes place like implied years before the events of the novel. It's also later revealed in the novel that the exploding lance was given to Ambrosius on purpose so that he could win the joust at all costs, because they wanted him to be the champion and not Ballister. And Ambrosius did know that it was weaponized, but whether or not he set it off on purpose is left very vague.
Interesting. Is it ever, maybe we'll get to it later, of why they wanted Ambrosius to be?
No.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Because this story doesn't have the background of, because as we discussed in the last question, this story doesn't have the background of Ballister being like a commoner or something.
No.
So they just decided Ambrosius should win. Like whoever,
Yes.
who the
institute, the
But for no,
institution, for no reason that I'm aware of.
Okay. But that I definitely prefer the movie's kind of version of events here. Because that seems, I will say there's a slight tweak of what the story's about in that instant, or at least this element of the story then, because in the movie it's about being like a commoner, a normal like everyday person versus being nobility, whereas the book's version sounds like it's almost maybe a bit about like disability or like like that sort of thing, whereas he's kind of cast aside because
I think, that's an element of it, but it's not something that like at least I didn't think was like an overall important part of the storyline altogether.
Which to be fair, in the movie, the commoner thing is not that important. Like, is not the main point of the story ultimately either. It's just like a little sub theme, kind of.
Yes.
So I guess it kind of tracks in level of importance.
Yeah, but I agree with you. I think the movie made a lot of good choices here. I think that what happens in the book like doesn't not work.
Yeah, like it sounds,
But everyone's motivations feel much more clear in the movie. And I also like that Ballister being like more obviously shoved into the villain role gives him more in common thematically with Nimona.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I actually have a separate question then. Does Nimona and him team up? And if so, why in the movie or in the book? Because in the movie she thinks he's a villain because he like killed the queen or whatever.
Right.
But in the book, it doesn't sound like that would be the case.
So the book starts with her showing up to his like evil lair, and he is a villain in the book, although we don't know what he's done prior to the events of the book that is villainous.
Okay.
He's just the villain.
Okay. Interesting.
So we're playing with like some archetypes.
Right, for sure. I guess I'm just I'd be interested to see like what, without having read it, I don't know like what he has done or like what, I guess like, so why, hold on, did you say why he's like, they cast him aside and that's what kicks him off his path to villainy, but like, so he actually maybe in the book is doing bad stuff?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because in the movie he's not a villain at all in the movie.
Like,
he's just a patsy.
Yes, in the book everybody says he's the villain. Like, oh, he's like the super villain. He's like the resident super villain.
Like
yeah,
yes,
kind of.
He has become
He's like the town's. He's not like a Joker, but he's like he's the resident villain,
right,
in the kingdom. He's like the resident bad guy.
Yeah.
But we don't actually know what he has done.
If he's actually done anything.
And if he has ever actually done anything villainous. Like by the time when we meet up with him, however many years removed from the events of this joust, he has like leaned into the villain role. He's like,
okay,
I'm the villain. Yes, he's become the villain they wanted him to be. But we don't actually know if he's really done anything villainous.
Other than like leaning in, like
other than like cackling and like
right.
rubbing his hands together.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Because and that basically tracks with the movie in the sense that because it's the same idea with Nimona's backstory, which we'll get to. Speaking of Nimona though, so she meets up with Ballister and teams up with him because she thinks he's a villain and she wants to be a sidekick. So they can go do crime together, and he very quickly explains, no, actually, I'm not a villain. I've been set up. This is all like I didn't do it. And so she's like, okay, well, I guess she basically is going to help him prove that he didn't do it. And in order to do so, they need to break into the institute to get something. I can't remember.
Is this when they're gonna get the squire? Or-
Yeah, I think so. I think that's why they're going to the Institute. But they need to get into the Institute. It's
Yeah.
at the very beginning. They need to get into the Institute. This is when we first start seeing her transform.
Oh
'Cause
no, I remember. He goes there because he's like, if I just go and tell them the truth, they'll believe me. And she's like, good luck with that.
Oh, okay.
And then they arrest him, and she comes to break him out.
That's right. That's right. You're right. That's right. He says, I can just tell him. And she goes, okay, fine. And then she breaks him out.
Yes.
Yeah. You're right. So as she's breaking him out, she gets in and she's breaking him out. And then this is revealed to us that Nimona is a shapeshifter. She can turn into mainly creatures, but all kinds of things. She can turn into other people. She can just basically transform into whatever she wants. And I say she. I don't know actually if Nimona uses.
They use she, her pronouns in the book.
Okay. I was just realizing because in the movie several times she's like, I'm not a girl, kind of in the same way that what's her name from the good a good
Janet
place? Yeah, Janet
not a
from a
girl.
good place is like not a girl. Yeah. This is an ancient we'll find out, spoilers, an ancient
Entity of some sort.
Lovecraftian like horror or whatever, essentially. But she is a shapeshifter, and I wanted to know if the ability to turn into like different animals and people and all that stuff, if that is what Nimona's abilities in the book are.
Yes. Yeah. In the book, we see her turn into a lot of things in the book, similar to how we do in the movie. But she also explicitly says that she can turn into any animal, but it has to be real. And there are fantasy creatures in this universe because she turns into like a dragon.
Dragons, and
and that she can turn into any person, real or made up, but that it's harder to do than turning into animals.
Okay. So as they're escaping, they get out and they eventually make their way to a subway, and they get on this subway to like get away. A bunch of stuff happens, but they're on this subway, and there's this very little brief reference that I was like, this is probably not in the book, but I was just interested. Where they're getting onto the subway, and Nimona turns into a rat and is dragging a slice of pizza onto the subway, and I was like, it's Pizza Rat. Is Pizza Rat in the book? Because I feel like that reference, I don't know when that's from, but it felt like it might have been after the book, but I wasn't sure, so I wasn't positive whether or not this would be in the book.
The Pizza Rat reference is not from the book. And that video is from 2015.
Oh.
It's from the same year that the completed graphic novel was published. I really thought Pizza Rat was more recent than 2015. I was a little surprised.
I knew it was before the Trump presidency because nothing good since. Like, nothing. Very few good things have happened since, and Pizza Rat is too pure for.
Did Pizza Rat like make the rounds again more recently? Because I feel like I remember people talking about it like within the last couple years.
It's been a pretty consistent meme for quite a while. It probably kicked back up again after this a little bit because this is a fairly popular movie.
Yeah.
I don't know, but there also may have been another Pizza Rat. I don't know. Who knows? I'm sure it happens occasionally. You know what I mean? I'm sure with the amount of pizza in New York City and the amount of rats in New York City, I'm sure the sight of a rat dragging a piece of pizza is not that uncommon. But
I bet it kicked up again when was the rats don't run this city, we run this city, because that was a big meme on Tumblr.
I don't know what that even is.
It was like an interview. Oh God. When was that from?
I don't have no idea.
It was like
what
a
you're
clip
talking
from an interview of like the mayor of, it might not have been New York now that I'm thinking about it. It might have been some other like major city where they were having like a big rat problem. And there was this like clip sound bite that like made like the rounds on TikTok particularly, where she was like, the rats don't run this city, we run this city.
Yeah, that would probably be a good time for two.
But actually, I think the rats do run the city.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things, kind of a recurring theme throughout, is that especially as Ballister is getting to know Nimona and like coming to terms with her abilities and the ability to transform and all this sort of stuff, and initially he's kind of like, whoa, that's crazy, and I think he does call her a monster initially at one point, and monster's kind of like the bad word in this one. It's like a stand-in for like, you know, bigoted language, I guess you should say, or I guess you could say. But one of the things that she keeps turning into all these different creatures, and at one point he's like, look, I think they're trying to like blend in or whatever, like with a crowd, and she's like wants to turn into, like, she wants to have wings or so, I don't know. She wants to do something, and he's like, look, I think it'd just be easier if you were a girl. And I can't remember what her response is, but she says something to that. And I wanted to know if that line was in the book, because to me it felt like, as we discussed in the prequel episode, the author of this book, Indy Stevenson, is a trans. And you said non-binary, or
I think it was as transmasculine,
Yeah.
but by gender, I think.
Okay, I couldn't remember what you said, but they're transmasc, and so that line stuck out to me as maybe a thing that the author would have been have heard several times, maybe from family members, etc. And I wanted to know if it came from the book for that reason, because I think it's definitely, this movie obviously plays a lot with identity, and
Yeah.
Nimona is kind of a stand-in for a character that, not even a stand-in, is a character that doesn't really have a super strong affinity for any of their specific identities.
Yeah, she doesn't fit in any like particular box.
Yes.
We'll say.
Yes, like as we said, he keeps calling her like a girl, and she's like, I'm not a girl, like blah blah, blah, and this sort of thing. And at one point later, he has this line where he's like, what would it kill you to not transform, or something like that? And she says, no, it wouldn't kill me, but I wouldn't be alive, or something like that. And like very much the idea that like she doesn't really have strong affinity for any specific identity that she can assume, and so kind of transforming and constantly changing her identity, which in this instance kind of a stand-in for gender, whatever, in a way that I think is kind of digestible for children. I thought was really interesting. So I wanted to know if this line came from the book, and if it felt like something that was very much, in line with like the message from the book about like if that kind of broader message about like gender and identity and that sort of thing was something that you felt kind of suffused the book.
So I do not believe the specific line is from the book. I don't remember it, and I kind of flipped back through and I didn't find it anywhere. I would not have been surprised if it was in the book, but I don't think it was. And as for, this kind of idea of Nimona being a stand-in for like the way that she plays with her identity being a stand-in for like gender, sexuality, what have you. Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
You think that definitely comes from the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I figured. It seemed pretty kind of integral to the film as like a subtext to Nimona's character. So I assumed it came from the book. And
I will
obviously
say, I think it's more subtextual in the book. I think the movie has more like direct and overt conversations about it.
This line in specific would be one of those, if it doesn't come from the book, would be one of those instances. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is for sure something that is present within the subtext of the book.
Yeah. And it wouldn't surprise me to know, because I believe I said that the authors of this film were just, I think it's like two cis guys, I'm fairly certain, but it wouldn't surprise, there was a ton of other people that were like credited as working on the film, and it wouldn't surprise me if Indy Stevenson, I assume, was fairly involved in the film.
I mean, I would think so.
Yeah. So I imagine he had, input on some of that stuff, and maybe there were some ideas that he, at the time, wasn't exploring as thoroughly in the book, that then in later years wanted to make more kind of explicit in the film. That's one of the cool things about adaptations is, if you're the author and you are involved in the film, you get a second go.
Yeah, you get a chance to revisit some stuff.
Yeah, and make things either more explicit or tweak some things to be more in line with, what you wanted to say. If not, maybe not every idea you had came across perfectly in the book or whatever, you get another go at it. So yeah, and like I said, I'm fairly certain that Indy Stevenson is credited as one of the story. I could be wrong, but they're definitely credited as a story, for the adaptation.
And because we know he worked on She-Ra and the Princesses of Power,
very familiar with
so was already
animation.
Already familiar with all of that, and already at Netflix when this whole thing came to Netflix.
True.
So
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah. Sure, he was involved. So we then eventually get it revealed that the director, who seems to be the head of the Institute, which is essentially like their version of like a police force, kind of.
Yeah.
This is what the Knights are a part of, and they're equivalent to cops, roughly kind
equivalent.
of, seemingly. We don't really explore it that much, like, because we're mostly not there, but that seems to be kind of what's going on. And it gets revealed that the director planted the murder sword on Ballister because the director, she didn't want commoners becoming knights, and so this
Yes.
is like a way to like make him a pariah and be like, see, look, we can't let their kind into the institute or whatever. And I felt like that was a pretty obvious reveal. I don't think it's trying to be particularly tricky, but I called that one like immediately upon the first time we talked to the director. I was like, this lady's evil. I was like 100% this lady's evil. And I wanted to know if the director planting the murder sword, which I guess there isn't a murder sword. Well, there is kind of in the.
There's a murder lance.
Yes,
kind of.
It doesn't murder anybody.
Or
But yeah,
the dismember
whatever.
lance.
Is the director of the institute revealed to be behind the evil, nefarious plot?
So I kind of covered this earlier, but the director does turn out to be like the main issue in the book, in the
Okay.
sense that the institution is like overall bad, and the director is definitely leading the charge on that.
Okay, interesting. I have more about that here on my next question about the Institute, because there's this line that I thought was interesting, and the movie kind of maybe my only disappointment with the film as a whole, honestly, because I really enjoyed this movie, which I thought I would, had a feeling I would. My only other complaint, which I'll just mention now because I don't really have another note about it, especially Nimona's dialogue was a little much in terms of the speed and the
quippiness.
The quippiness was
Yeah.
a little try-hardy at times. Just a
I would
little,
agree with that. Just a
just a
skosh.
smidge. And it wasn't like awful, and it was mostly funny and enjoyable and cute. It was just there was a little bit too much where I'm just like, okay, we get it. Like just a little, just like a 10-15% too much of the quippy, like constant. Every single line gets it's like it just reminded me of like a. Oh God, I can't even think of a good example, but yeah, it just felt a little dated and maybe because part of this, maybe when this film was being worked on in 2016 or whatever, it felt like it felt like 10 or 15 or not 15, it felt like maybe 5 to 10 years like out of date in terms of the style of the quippiness and humor, especially coming from Nimona specifically. Just felt a little dated in a way that hasn't aged perfectly. But again, not bad, just. I don't know. And
it's just a wee bit. It's not one of those things where it disrupts your enjoyment of the movie. Like I was thinking when you said quippy, I was thinking of Beastly.
A little bit actually.
And how they like everything that they say to each other is like
it's a retort.
It's a retort.
It's
yeah,
Whedon-esque
everything
a
is
little
like
bit.
it's all a quip. It's clever.
It reminds you a little bit of like the first Avengers or what like that.
Yeah.
It's a little Whedon-y, which I don't want to. It's not. He doesn't hold a fucking copyright on obnoxious retorty dialogue, but
it's a good reference.
It's a good
for it
reference
nonetheless.
for it nonetheless. And I like a lot of Whedon's style of writing, some of that stuff, but it's just it just felt like it was dialed up. Like what it felt like, I think, is that there was a writer's room and almost every single joke got put in to the point where it's just like, okay, guys, just take the foot off the gas, just like
I mean,
a little bit.
At least she's supposed to be like 1,000+ year old entity and not like an actual teenage girl.
Yeah, like 14-year-old, which would be completely unreal. Yeah, and that's fair. It's just it's not so much that it didn't feel true to her character or anything, or like it was just like physically grating, like a little bit, like it's just like, or like mentally exhausting a little bit of just like this person would be annoying to be around, like too much, like if they're just like, can you just dial it back just a touch? But just again, just a smidge. Overall, really liked, and it really was only like the very beginning of the film. I actually think like as the film progressed, that
it kind of leveled out a little bit.
Leveled out, and there wasn't nearly as much like constant banter, which I thought was nice. But anyways, during this whole thing with the Institute, there's this line where this is my other criticism of the film, is that there's this point where they're talking about how the director knows, like I don't remember the exact context of this conversation, but Nimona and Ballister are having a conversation about the Institute and about the director. And I think Nimona's basically like, we need to tear it all down kind of thing, because she's very like anarchy pilled or whatever. And Ballister has this line where he says, the Institute's not the problem, the director is. Because at this point, he's still in line and buying the whole thing that the director, which is true, but that the director set this all up. And he's like, we need to like take her down. And Nimona's kind of leaning more into the like anarchy kind of like, no, the whole system needs to be raised kind of thing. And I 100%, especially knowing this movie came out in 2023. Now, knowing that maybe the writing started a little bit earlier, and I'm interested to see if this is in the book, because the line "the institute is not the problem, the director is like quintessential kind of liberal, and I say liberal in a somewhat derogatory term. Like, and when I mean liberal is like the liberal institution, trusting liberal institutions and institutions in general. I mean, it's literally called the Institute. It's a little bit like, oh, the issue with policing isn't the whole structure of policing and the structure of our society and the way that policing is kind of built from the ground up. The problem is that there's like some bad cops.
Yeah.
When really the problem is more holistic than that. And I was surprised because I really thought this movie was going to undercut this idea that Ballister has, that no, it's just the director that's the issue. The Institute's fine. The institution of policing is fine. It's just this one person is an asshole. And I just feel like that's a slightly outdated progressive critique of institutions like this, is we've gotten away because we've become more holistic in our critique of, and when I say we, I mean people on the left, progressives, that sort of thing, more holistic in our critiques of these sort of institutions, and realizing that it's the institutions and the structures of the institutions and the powers that create these institutions that are the problem, the systems, as opposed to like specific bad actors within them.
Right.
And so I was really expecting this movie to disabuse Ballister of his belief that the Institute is fine, that it's just the director. I really thought we were going to get a second rug pull for him where, oh, it goes way beyond just this director being evil. It's actually this whole institution is messed up. And so I wanted to know if that line came from the book or if any of that critique of the institution and stuff came from the book, and how that all played out versus the movie, because that was interesting to me.
So I think this is an area where we can hand it to the book. So the book doesn't explicitly get into the like one bad apple mindset that you're referencing, but the Institute does get completely disbanded at the end, and it is shown to be like villainous overall. Like the director is kind of our main point of focus for it, but like overall the Institute is bad and it's rotten to the core, and we're shown that explicitly within the novel.
Yeah.
Whereas in the movie, the Institute seems to still be a thing.
Yeah.
At the end of the story.
And that's what really surprised me, is that it doesn't seem, the movie never really, to my memory, my recollection, critique the idea of the institution as a whole. There might be like one throwaway
There's
line.
like a little bit, maybe a little bit of a critique of the idea of like just nobility getting to participate in this, but not a ton.
Not a ton, no.
And it is interesting because it does feel like they explicitly set up critiquing that.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if something got cut towards the end or whatever.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, because we see like Knight still walking around after, like in the happy wrap up, like where like everything is fixed and there's a big hole in the wall, blah blah blah. Like,
yeah, everything's great now, but we still have cops.
We still have cops seemingly functioning the exact same way, and all that's changed is that the director is like not a part of it anymore. They don't, at least they don't go into any deep. And again, it's a kids movie. Like, we don't have to get into a very deep critique of
but should we though?
Probably should, in my opinion. I'm just saying, like, it's a, we don't have to get into the nitty gritty about the ways they've restructured but I would expect some if that was a point the movie really wanted to make, was about the fact that the problem is the Institute, not just the director. I would have thought the movie would have taken more time to actually make that point, and it really doesn't feel like it does at all.
Yeah.
Which I thought is really, and it's especially surprising to hear that the book does that when the book is from 2015 and the movie was written 2020. Like, I don't know when we talked about it in the prequel. It was a long, arduous production process. But I mean, the film didn't get finished until 2022, so they could have made tweaks to the story.
Following a lot of,
That's what I mean.
Very public
Yes.
discussion about
Policing and
institutions.
And that's, yes, we hit at that inflection point in 2020 during the Black Lives Matter movement and during all the discussions of policing and everything. And obviously, not much has actually changed.
Right. But we did have
societally.
that
But
discussion.
we had that discussion, and generally speaking, the people that are writing a movie like this, which is full of very progressive, left-leaning ideals about identity, about all that sort of stuff. This is the woke movie that everybody, that I'm sure people like scaremongered that it is. It is, except for this particular instance that feels
we still like cops.
Yeah, that actually it's not. Yeah, cops. And look, we're not even gonna. This is a whole different discussion. It's a very complicated thing, but I was just very surprised for the movie to not stick to its guns more and really go for the throat in terms of dismantling systemic injustice, and instead just kind of went, actually it is just kind of one bad person was the main issue.
Yeah.
Also we should be more egalitarian, but really the issue was this one evil lady who just was racist, or not classist, I guess, but
classist.
Yeah, and it doesn't say, hey, society's classist. It says this lady was classist. And to me, that is not a holistic or correct take, which is a little disappointing, especially when the book did it earlier. And I would be interested to hear Indy Stevenson's thoughts on that, the way the movie handled that. I don't know. It's just that was very surprising, and I was my main critique of the movie, narratively and thematically.
Yeah, I would agree.
Anyways, it's just a kids movie. Yeah, shut up. Nobody you're not. I say that that person's not listening to this podcast. They wrote a 1-star review a year ago saying, why couldn't you leave your politics out of it, and then stopped listening.
That's still my favorite review of our podcast.
Yeah. My favorite thing about that review is that it happened so long after we had been because it was years into the podcast, and and written with the implication that they had been listening since the beginning, and that somehow we had recently decided to bring politics in. I was like, what were you even listening to? Whatever. Anyways, a bunch of stuff happens. Ballister talks to Ambrosius, who they find out that Nimona is the ancient black evil monster thing from the stories that they all knew about. Nimona is an ageless, again, Lovecraftian horror, basically. And Ambrosius reveals this to Ballister, and then Ballister kind of confronts Nimona about it, and they have a falling out over this because he calls her a monster again, blah, blah, blah. And then she kind of has this crisis where she has this, she runs into the woods, feels very abandoned and whatnot. And we get this flashback revealing her backstory. We learned a little bit about it earlier, but now we kind of get more about it and actually what happened between her and Glorith. Because in the beginning, the whole idea was there was this evil monster. Glorith defeated it, created the knights to stop them, to protect the realm, kind of thing. And then it's revealed in this that Glorith and Nimona was this quote unquote monster, were friends as children, and there was a misunderstanding basically. But I wanted to know, there's this montage where as Nimona is reminiscing about her childhood and trying to find a place where she fit in. We get this montage of her turning into different animals and trying to be friends with other animals, and them all just bailing on her, and it's heartbreaking. It's so sad. And I wanted to know if that particular flashback part came from the book. And on top of that, the whole thing with Glorith and her as children.
This flashback sequence broke my heart,
and
I loved it.
It's
so
good.
sad, and it's so good. It's also pretty different from the book's version. In the book, the flashback that we see of Nimona's actual backstory, because she does give a false version earlier, similar to how she does in the movie. But the flashback to her actual backstory is that she's a little girl whose parents and entire village insist that she has been replaced by some kind of monster because they saw her transform into a dragon in order to defeat raiders that were attacking their village. And so then the institution apprehends her and does experiments on her before she escapes from them. Glorith is not mentioned in that backstory, but the legend of Glorith defeating a monster is in the book, along with a mention of a theory that she didn't actually defeat the monster at all, but that it defeated her and then took her place. So there's, maybe some things that the movie is kind of pulling from a little bit.
Yeah.
But overall, it's not particularly similar.
Yeah.
I really liked that the movie tied Nimona's backstory directly to Glorith. I also thought that the movie's version fit really nicely with the overall themes and messages, perhaps better than the books does.
Yeah.
The book's backstory explains why she hates the institution so much, but I think the movie does a better job of communicating like some of the overall themes.
Yeah.
Like we've got kind of this idea that like evil isn't born, it's created, and it's often not evil at all, but it's just something that's different and misunderstood.
Yeah. Yeah. And vice versa, that the people who are oppressors in this instance, the Institute and stuff, are born from a place of like misunderstanding and fear and that sort of thing, and not like outright evil either. Like that, like the place where this all started with Glorith wasn't from a place of like Glorith being evil, or like being like a bad person. It was her being influenced by the adults in her life in this particular instance, and like and people just being scared and confused and like not understanding something different, basically.
And not willing to try to understand something different.
Okay, so then that's the whole backstory for Nimona. We find out, yes, she was this ancient monster, and then she's been dealing with this sense of abandonment and not having a place where she belongs her whole life for thousands of years at this point. And then Ballister basically, like, this all comes to a head after Ballister kind of confronts her and they have their falling out. And in this instance, Nimona basically comes to the decision that she's going to kill herself. She sees Glorith. They have this giant Glorith statue in the middle of the city, like with a sword, that is like recreating the famous moment from legend where Glorith vanquished the monster or whatever. And Nimona decides she's going to kill herself by impaling herself on the sword. So she turns, and this seemingly kind of uncontrollably turns into the giant black smoke demon monster that is like from legend or whatever, that we have not seen her become yet, because she has like smaller, like more controlled version, I guess, that she can turn into. But I specifically wanted to know if the design of this great black monster thing that Nimona turns into came from the book, because in the movie it is cool as hell, in my opinion, and I want to know if it was in the book.
I would not say that the designs are super similar. She does transform into a huge beast at the end, but it's depicted as like more dragon-like than it is in the movie.
Dragony, but not super dragony.
More dragony in the book than it is in the movie.
But as I mentioned, Nimona decides that she's going to kill herself because she doesn't fit anywhere. She has nobody that cares about her, that sort of thing. At the utmost, kind of, she's just feeling very helpless and hopeless, and so decides to do this. And I wanted to know if that moment came from the book, because it is woof.
This is not from the book. So at the book's climax, Nimona and Ballister have both been captured by the Institute, and they have Nimona in like a self-healing bubble, some kind of containment system thing. It's an orb. I don't really know exactly what it is.
Fair enough.
But it's like a self-healing thing. So
like
she
the thing
can't...
they trap what's the guy, the Sandman in the Sandman series? Remember in the TV show?
They
have him in like a little unbreakable,
in an unbreakable,
unmagicable
thing,
crystal ball thing.
Yeah. So she can't break out of it. But they take a blood sample from her, and she's still able to control the blood from inside the bubble. So it's actually her blood that transforms into the dragon thing.
And then the dragon just goes rampaging, or is
basically
it okay? Yeah. With any goal in mind, or not?
Destruction.
Okay. So in the movie, Ballister shows up and on the sword at the last second, and as Nimona is going to impale herself, uses his his robot hand to stop her. And I wanted to know if if Ballister kind of, and he like basically he's like, hey, I see you, I care about you, that sort of thing. Basically, just is there to be the friend that she needs in that moment and support her. And I wanted to know if that moment came from the book.
It does not. In the book, Ballister actually ends up having to shoot the dragon in order to make it stop rampaging.
Okay, so pretty different.
Pretty different. Yeah.
But I mean, I guess shooting the dragon doesn't, in that instance, it's not Nimona,
It's not
right? It's like an
her,
extension of her.
technically, yeah, it's like an extension
and it doesn't
of her.
like kill her to shoot it.
No.
Or anything. Okay, interesting. So then the director, he's able to stop her, and she turns back into just like regular, non-giant rampaging monster Nimona. And they kind of hug and that sort of thing. But the director decides that now they have their opportunity to shoot Nimona and destroy the ancient evil beast once and for all. Despite the fact that shooting this cannon into the city that they have these huge like ion cannons on the wall or whatever that they use for defense. They turn it around to shoot it at Nimona. And Ambrosius and all the other knights are like, hey, we shouldn't do this. You're going to kill a bunch of people. But the director is like, no, we must stamp out the evil kind of thing. And in that moment, they see that this is going to happen. And Nimona turns into a giant, in Wikipedia, it said like phoenix-like creature, I guess. It's just like a giant red bird kind of.
I mean, that is kind of what a phoenix is.
Sure. I don't know if there's any discernible enough features to say it's like definitely a phoenix, but
it's also like symbolically a phoenix.
Sure. I think that all makes sense. It's just, I don't know if I would say it's probably like a phoenix. It does say phoenix like. Sure. Fair enough. Whatever. Does that happen in the book?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
She like goes nuclear at the end and blows up the institution. And the citizens don't really know anything about her or her sacrifice. In the book, the official story is that the dragon creature was an escaped illegal experiment, which is part of what gets the institution shut down for good. My thoughts on the changes to the ending overall are that I preferred the movie's version. It's like a little saccharine and a little obvious and a little peak YA, but I think it's more thematically resonant than what the book does, especially alongside the other changes that the movie made to the story and the characters.
I would agree. The ending in the movie I thought works beautifully. It's not super unique, or like original.
Yeah.
It's not anything like it didn't take me by surprise. Like I wasn't like, oh my God, I didn't see that coming.
I mean, we've seen Saved Through the Power of Friendship a million times.
But it's done very well.
But it's done very well. It works really well. It's like I said, it's thematically resonant.
Yes, and there's some great visual. I absolutely love the shot where you see we get this big wide. I'm a sucker for a tableau, and we get this big wide shot of the sword and Ballister standing on it with his hand up, and the monster like right up against it, about to like impale itself, and it's this big again tableau, and it's so cool. I loved so much about the visuals throughout the whole movie, but in that scene in particular, I thought it was really neat. And yeah, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's all done really well and is very emotionally affecting. And I think it gets across the message perfectly, especially for this kind of story. No notes. I mean, other than I guess it could be a little more original, but like whatever. It's for what this is. It's perfect. It's perfectly good.
Not everything has to be original.
No, not at all. No. And my last question is: so then Nimona flies as the giant phoenix thing and destroys the cannon and kills the director, saves the city, and Ballister goes up there and like there's little red specks, kind of sparkles, ashes, whatever, kind of falling from the sky, and they go out, and it appears that Nimona has sacrificed herself, is dead. But as I said in the summary at the beginning, he goes to their old hideout, and as he's kind of cleaning up their old hideout, he hears a knock at the door, opens the door, doesn't see anybody, but this is echoes the exact same thing that happened when he met Nimona for the first time. He shuts the door and turns around, and we hear Nimona's voice, and he starts to cuss her. He's like, "You son of a," or I don't know what he says. And then it cuts, and in the implication, and not even the implication, with revealing that Nimona has survived somehow, is alive, has been who knows. Maybe there will be a sequel and we will find out. I don't know, but is there a last second reveal that Nimona survived the big climax.
So there is something similar in the book. As Ballister is recovering from like the events of the whole climax, a doctor comes in to check on him and kind of casually refers to Nimona as a monster. And Ballister defends her, expresses regret that he couldn't save her because she was worth saving. And then that doctor leaves, and then the same doctor walks in and has no recollection of their conversation. So it was Nimona, and then he chases after her, but he's not able to catch up with her. So she is alive, but we don't get the like implied happy reunion that we get in the movie.
Okay. Cool. All right. Those are all my questions. I don't have anything for Lost in Adaptation, but we do have some other stuff to get to. So we're going to find out now what Katie thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
I have a handful of things here. The world building in the movie is way more like futuristic, anachronistic than it is in the book. In the book, it's much more recognizable as like a straight up fantasy world, but with like fantastical sci-fi elements woven in. And the movie kind of flips that. It's like more primarily sci-fi with some fantasy elements woven in.
Yeah.
And I don't hate what the movie did, but I did think that the book's take was slightly more unique and interesting. Speaking of that, Ballister is really into science in the book, and I thought it was a shame to lose that. We see him build his robot arm in the movie, or we presume that he
it's
built
kind of
it.
like during that opening credit montage, kind of, it's not even credits, but like,
yeah, we
like
see
a very
him.
quick-
I feel like it's kind of implied that maybe he built it, but that's really all we get of his affinity for science that he has in the book.
There's nothing else.
While I overall preferred the movie's timeline, I liked the way that the book's narrative like meted out the backstory. The movie front-loaded a lot of information, which ended up being fine and working, but the book had more of a slow burn to it that was very enjoyable in the way that like information was doled out.
Yeah.
And
Which
then,
is a little easier to do in
that format,
than
yeah.
an hour and 30-minute movie or
Yes.
whatever. So.
And one other thing that I forgot to write down here is that a couple times throughout the graphic novel, Nimona changes her hairstyle and hair color, which I thought made sense because she's like a shapeshifter and it was fun. Yeah. And I was a little surprised the movie didn't show that.
Maybe they felt it would be too close to Ramona Flowers from
Perhaps.
Scott Pilgrim, because that is yeah. All right, let's go ahead now and find out what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
We already talked about a lot of things that I thought were better in the movie, but a couple other little things. I liked changing Ballister's last name from Blackheart to Boldheart, especially given other changes. I initially thought that the movie might have him like take on the name Blackheart, but I thought it made sense, before I saw the whole movie, I was like, oh, maybe that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
But now having seen the whole thing, I'm like, that makes sense to just have it be changed.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of those things. If I had to guess, it's one of those things where they just decided to, well, one, he's not a villain at all.
Yeah.
But two, even if he had been, I think it was probably just a choice of like coming to a place where maybe we don't always have black mean evil in these stories. Like maybe it's just one of those small, subtle language changes that is like, might as well make that change. We don't. Like it obviously it plays into a lot of, and I'm sure there's a lot to it. I'm not saying that it's inherently racist to use, to have a character named Blackheart be evil or whatever. But it is one of those small language changes, especially in a kid's thing, where to just like not have black always be associated with evil or whatever is like I think a perfectly good goal, like a perfectly good like subtle small change to make in the way we write and talk about things. And that would be my guess as to probably why. Like one of the main reasons.
One of the reasons,
they changed the name.
I really liked the scene where Nimona shapeshifts into Ballister on the subway platform. I thought that was fun. And then something that the movie dropped, a big part of the plotline in the book is that Ballister and Nimona discover that the Institute is experimenting with jade root, which is in universe a highly dangerous and highly illegal substance. So they put this plan into motion where they make some of the citizens sick on purpose to sow distrust in the institute, which does work, but overall ended up feeling not super related to the rest of the story. So I thought that excising that was a good call on the movie's part.
Yeah, and I wonder if they also decided that maybe it was a little bit too, because that seems like maybe an allusion to like the crack epidemic of like the or something like that, like
Yeah.
potentially about like, and I like maybe that's what the were the kind of ideas they're playing it here, and maybe they decided it was a little too messy to like try to work that in a way that is like politically coherent or something like that.
Well, I think it would have just been too messy to work in, especially with everything else going on.
True. Yeah. It's definitely just from a time thing. It makes sense to cut it, but I also could just see it being like, this is like, maybe there's an interesting allegory or something there, but it's just way too complicated to like make work in this story. So let's just cut it out. All right, that is it for Better in the Movie. Let's go ahead and talk about a couple things that the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
Just a few things, few little details here. Ballister does have a mechanical robot arm in both. Nimona does take an arrow to the knee.
Oh yeah.
Everybody remember that meme?
God, that meme.
Hands up if you remember
It's
that
an old
meme.
but it checks out. That was meta. That was
memes on memes.
an old meme, but it checks out. That's an old meme, but it checks out. That's an old meme, but oh god. We've entered recursion.
And Ballister and Nimona do watch a zombie movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. As a whole, do you feel like the style, can you just open that to like a page? I would just be interested, like aesthetically, like visually, does it feel similar at all? Or does the movie go like a fairly different? Oh, very different.
Yeah, pretty different.
Wildly different. So yeah, this is not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
This is N.D. Stevenson's like comic style.
And he like drew it himself?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if he illustrated it or just.
I've read one volume of Lumberjanes, and Lumberjanes is the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, the movie is very much it's completely departure from and pretty good looking. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But all right, well, let's get to a few odds and ends before the final verdict. There's a great little comedy beat that I thought was really funny when Ballister is explaining his robot arm or whatever, or that his arm got cut off. Nimona says, "Did they let you keep the old one?" in this very creepy way, but while she's saying it, her face, she gets these big like doll eyes, and she does this very slow mechanical head turn towards him while saying that line, like kind of like a creepy doll in like a movie, like. And I thought it was a great visual gag. It made me laugh a lot. I liked that moment a lot. Did they let you keep the old one? And just that, like, again, the very specific choice of the way the head moves and everything was so fun. I thought there's a lot of little details in the animation of this movie that are fantastic. But when they're in the institute and she's breaking them out, and at one point something happens and an alarm starts going off, Ballister's like, "We got to run. We got to get out of here." And Nimona's like, "No, we got to break things or whatever." And she's like got this look of malice, or not malice, but like chaos on her face. And the alarms are going off. So there's like red lights blinking everywhere, but the red light is like reflecting in her eyes and not in Ballister's. And they're like standing right next to each other. Little subtle detail because she's ready to burn it all down. And he's like, "No, we should leave." And I liked that little subtle allusion to their personalities. And then during that escape, they end up on the subway, and I was just showing this to a coworker today because I thought it was so freaking cool. Who hadn't seen the movie, is that she explains that this is the first telling of her backstory.
Yeah, this is the fake backstory.
It's true, but like just leaving out like a lot of. Well, I guess it's not true, really.
Yeah.
Sorry, but she tells this fake version of the backstory. But the way it's done in the movie is that she starts telling it, and as she tells it, she goes and like kind of looks wistfully out the window as she's reminiscing, and the camera pans over and looks out the window of this subway they're on, and then we start looking at the tiled subway wall
Yeah, as it's like rushing by.
as it's rushing by, and then the tiles become the like visual representation of the story she's telling.
Yeah.
And it plays out like like in the tiles basically, but it's really cool because every now and then you see like power boxes and pipes and like stuff that would be on the actual wall, like rushing past on the wall as the story is playing out. I thought that was freaking awesome.
Yeah, it was a really cool little animated moment.
Yeah. It's the only part of the movie that does anything super different like that. The intro is kind of different, but it's just like mostly like stills and stuff like that. Like the backstory of Glorith and all that. It's a little different, but it's not particularly. It's just kind of. But this part I thought was super cool. The rest of the movie in general is very beautiful, but it's not like super unique looking. It reminds me of some other things I see. It reminds me a little bit of Arcane, but not nearly as pretty as like the TV show Arcane that we watched. But it's
it reminded me a little bit of the Spider-Verse movies, but not nearly as pretty.
Not nearly as detailed or as pretty. Somebody else was saying, or some other movie. One of my coworker was like, "Oh, it kind of remind." I can't remember. He said, "Is there a movie called Claws or something?" I don't know. That he there was some other movie that or TV show or something that he thought it, but it wasn't like it looks good and it looks great, and there were some really cool visual moments, and like some of the designs and stuff were really cool. Again, like the big evil black monster at the end, and some of the big like scenes and tableaus we get are really cool, but the actual art style was not like mind blowing. It wasn't like watching Spider-Verse for the first time, or even like Arcane, which was really unique in its way. It was just kind of like a lesser version of all of those, but still very serviceable, very good, and works for what the story was. But that scene with the subway I thought was awesome. During that scene though, I think or a scene close to that, we find out that, or no, they're in an alleyway or something. It's some sort of a piece of pizza pops up that has pineapple on it, and Nimona's like, "Pineapple on pizza? Ew." And I was like, oh no, I have to hate this character now.
Maybe it was Hawaiian pizza.
She just said pineapple on pizza. Ew, she didn't say Hawaiian pizza. And even Hawaiian pizza is not that bad. It's just not
good.
The best way to eat pineapple on pizza. But pineapple belongs on pizza. Fight me. Fight both of us. This is an official position.
Okay, if you just don't like pineapple, that's one thing.
Fine.
That's fine. Carry on with your life
like
disliking pineapple.
And you like pineapple.
And you hate pineapple on pizza, you are simply not doing it correctly.
I will stick to this. You're either not doing it correctly or you're being a weird Puritan for no reason. Like, because that's one of the other things is people are like, oh, I think the big thing is people have Hawaiian pizza, and Hawaiian pizza is not great because it's just not the best combination. Like, ham is not salty enough. It's not spicy. It's just ham kind of sucks in general on pizza, in my opinion. Pepperoni, bacon, any of those things is better. And you need something else to go with the pineapple. But so yeah, I think that's part of it. But I also think there's a huge thing or not a huge thing. I think another portion of it is people who are like Puritans and for some reason just think pineapple itself doesn't belong on pizza, period, which I think is very strange.
I also think that's strange.
Put whatever you want on pizza.
I agree.
I think it can get to a point where it's maybe not pizza anymore, depending on what you put on it, but pineapple has not hit that. Pineapple is no different than putting so many, like a tomato. It's like, they're like not even that far off. Pineapples are sweeter and like whatever, it's a citrus, but like, I think actually, I don't know if pineapple is technically a citrus. I imagine it is.
Isn't pineapple like a really big berry?
Probably. I don't know. Anyways, point being, pineapple's great on pizza. So there.
A thought that I kept having continuously throughout the movie when like Ballister is trying to sneak around, and then later on when he meets when him and Ambrosius meet up at this like pub or whatever, and they've got like cloaks on to hide their identities. I'm like, you guys would be way more inconspicuous if you took off your giant ass armor once in a while.
Yeah.
Because they have this giant knight armor on and then a little cloak over it. And I was like, what do you think you're getting away with here? Everybody knows it's you.
Yeah. Yep. A little detail that I thought was really fascinating in the animation style that it took me a while to notice. And then once I did, I was like, holy cow, that's kind of cool. And I'm not sure how common this is in animation. Maybe it's more common than I thought. But a lot of the different characters, and I don't think every single character is unique, but the main characters at least, all have different shaped eye highlights. So in the animation style, everybody's eyes have like a little white kind of like in an anime
Yeah.
or whatever, like a little white highlight that is, light reflecting off their iris or off their whatever, off their eyeball. And the movie makes this choice where all of the characters have the main characters at least have slightly different shaped ones, which I thought was really interesting. Like Ambrosius's highlights are triangles, Ballister's are squares, Nimona's are like thin diamonds, kind of.
Yeah.
Almost like more of just like a traditional version of it that you would normally see. And then the director has like square diamond. They're like diamonds, but they're squared off more, like where it's Nimona's is kind of like squished and more like thin. The directors are basically like squares that are rotated to a diamond shape. Anyways, I just thought that was really fascinating to have that little subtle difference to kind of help differentiate between their character designs. I thought was really neat. And something I've never noticed in animation before. Again, it's probably not unique to this movie, but I thought it was interesting. Before we get to the final verdict, we want to remind you can do us a giant favor by heading over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, Threads, any of those places. Follow, interact. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you had to say about Nimona, what your opinions are on the film, on the graphic novel if you've read it. You can also help us out by heading over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Drop us a little 5-star rating. Write us a review. If you want to subscribe, you can also do that on YouTube now. You can just search for This Film Is Lit. You'll find us every single episode of our backlog, except for like 1 or 2 that were copyright issues, are out there. And then every episode going forward gets posted to YouTube. So you can listen on YouTube if that's your preferred podcast catcher. And then finally, if you wanted to help us out even more, you get over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Give us a few bucks a month. You get access to bonus content starting at the $5 level a month, where you get 1 episode every month where we do whatever we want to talk about. It's been a while since we've done one because we did them back to back at the end.
I know. It feels like it's been forever since we did a bonus episode, but we're right on schedule.
Yeah. Because we did the March episode right at the end of March, and then we did the April episode also right at the end of March to get ahead. But so our most recent bonus episode was the Alice in Wonderland for Disney. And then before that was the
Singing in the Rain
episode, which was a lot of fun. And then next episode is...
Next bonus episode will be The Land Before Time.
The Land Before Time. So there you go.
Get your tissues ready.
Yes. That's every month a new bonus episode where we spend about an hour or so, however long, talking about a different movie. Whatever it is that we want to talk about that's not based on a book usually. So, Katie, and then also if you want to support us even more, at $15 a month, you get access to priority recommendations. If you're a big fan of the show and you would really love for us to talk about your favorite book or movie, adaptation that we haven't done yet, and you want us to do it, you can support us for $15 a month. Stick around for a little bit, request that, and we'll add it to our list as soon as we can get to it. Usually doesn't take too long. But we're scheduled pretty far
sometimes
out.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah, sometimes it does. It just depends. But okay, Katie, it's time for the final verdict.
Sentence fast, verdict after. That's stupid.
After we finished the movie, I turned to you and said, the world is the same and the characters are the same, but the story is completely different. Well, it's not completely different, but it is quite different. I enjoyed reading the graphic novel, and I'm glad to get it off of my to-be-read list, where it had been languishing probably since 2015. It was fun and unique, I liked the art style, and I liked the overall message. However, I do think that the graphic novel suffers just a touch from its origin as a serial publication. It seems clear, at least to me, that some parts of the story were being made up as the author went along. Which is fine, but it does result in a story that feels a little disjointed at times. The movie has an overall much smoother and more cohesive plot, as well as more complete feeling character arcs. And while, as I said, I did enjoy the graphic novel, it did not hit me emotionally the way that the movie did, particularly in regard to Nimona's backstory and the climax of the film. I think that the movie benefited from having a completed world to play in, whereas it seemed at times like the graphic novel was trying to find its footing as it went. And while both the book and the movie were going for the same final message, the movie hit that nail on the head in a way that the book just didn't manage, at least for me. And it's for those reasons primarily that I'm going to give this one to the movie.
All right, Katie, what's next?
Up next, we are talking about something current and topical.
Oh my goodness.
We're going to be talking about Poor Things, novel by Alistair Gray and 2023 film.
So excited. I've been dying because I've been wanting to watch this movie for a while because it just looks like an interesting movie. But then I started seeing discourse, and boy, I have to watch this movie.
Did the discourse look like something we could sink our teeth into.
I had to watch this. I was like, we got to do this ASAP because I need to be able to participate in, not even participate in the discourse, but understand where I fall in the discourse because I haven't seen the movie, so I don't actually know. I've seen the trailer. You know what I mean? I don't know who I agree with. I have my inklings.
I feel like I think I know where we're gonna fall in the discourse.
But having not seen the film, I don't know. So yes, I'm very excited to finally get to be part of that and be caught up on it. So yes, Poor Things. That's what we're talking about in 2 weeks' time. But in 1 week's time, we'll be back here to see what you all had to say about Nimona and preview Poor Things. Maybe mention some of the discourse. I don't know what we're going to talk about in the prequel episode. But yeah, that'll be in 1 week's time. Until that time, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.